Good afternoon, Android. I would like to walk you through something that I think has been tripping up a lot of people on problem B of the homework. So, something that we actually don't often have to do in computer science is basically deal with a situation where we have an unknown number of inputs. Often, you will be given the number of inputs, or just more generally, you will be given the number of times you need to do something. Usually you're making something like a for loop and you kind of have like a set number of iterations, or maybe you're iterating through the length of a collection. But it's kind of uncommon that we run into a situation where we truly don't know how many times we'll need to do something. And this actually comes up less often than you might think with UI programming because usually instead of having loops, we have event handlers that are basically functions that get called when a specific thing happens, like a button gets clicked. So we're not usually dealing with scenarios where we're looping and checking something, but more often we actually just have our code wait idle until something happens, at which point we do things. So that's why I'm going to walk you through how to basically handle these situations, because I don't think it's super important that you have a very strong foundation in this for later, and it seems like some of you have never had to deal with this before and are getting a little lost. So let's jump into this. Right now, we've got the world's worst game because it's heads or tails, except you don't even get to pick. You just are always heads. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So, not a great game. But, the boss says, we gotta make this game more interactive. We need to be able to show ads to people. And so, it's our job to run into this game and add a replay function. So, let's do that. Let's basically let someone play this game as many times as they want. So, how would we go about doing that? Well, we are going to use the while loop. So right now I have this thing, function game. Let's ask them if they would like to play again. So I'll say, would you like to play again? And then we'll just say yes or no. We'll close this. So now if we run it, we'll see it says, would you like to play again? Yes or no? But then it exits. So how do we actually make it let them play again? Well, one way to do this is to use a while loop. So we could do something like while readline equals yes. And then we could say game, and then we could copy this and keep asking people if they would like to play again. And then we can say yes, 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 and then we'll say no. Now, one thing is this obviously doesn't handle case sensitivity. So if I say, would you like to play again? And I say yes, it's going to terminate because that's not the same case. Obviously, you can just do like a quick call to uppercase or lowercase in Kotlin to convert the case, and that way then you're not worrying about case sensitive equality checking. It doesn't matter if they type an uppercase or a lowercase thing. But one thing that you'll notice with this is that we're duplicating our code. You can see we actually kind of start off by running our game once, but then we have this loop, and so we have to duplicate this code, and we have to duplicate this print line, and it's just kind of ugly. So one way to get around this is the combination of the while loop, but then we use the break statement. And the way the break statement works is if you, inside of a loop, say break, and that gets executed, this line of code gets executed, our loop will stop running. So let's see what happens if we just run this just like this. So now if we hit yes, it'll execute the code inside the loop because we hit yes, right? So these lines are these lines running. We get to our loop, we read in their input. In this case, it is y. So we run the game again. We ask them again, but then we get to the break statement, and the break statement says break out of this loop and continue running. So we actually get out of the loop, and there's nothing after the loop, so our program terminates. Now, one thing to note with the break statement is it only breaks you out of one level of loop. So if you had a while loop around this while loop and you called a break, it would only kick you to the outer loop. It wouldn't just get you out of all of the loops. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, but I don't anticipate you running into that, at least on this homework. So how does this break statement help us with what we're trying to do, which is to simplify this program so we don't have duplicated code? Well, the nice thing about break is it basically lets us in our loop decide where we want to check if we should keep looping. So what does this look like? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this code where we're checking if they said that they want to keep playing, and we're just going to replace it with true. Now what we're going to do is after we ask if they want to play again, we're going to put an if statement, and we'll put our condition in here. Now we can put these, and we're going to put the break statement inside of this if statement. So now you can see we've got a thing where we're going to run the game, we're going to print, we're going to run our loop. And right now this wouldn't work exactly the way we want because it's going to run this code twice before checking, right? Because it's going to run these two and then it's always going to loop because we have true. So this loop will try to run forever. And so it's going to print again. So the last thing we need to do is get rid of these two lines. And you can see now our program looks like this. We have a while loop. We run our game. We ask if they would like to play again. And if they say they would, we break, which isn't what we want. We should check if they did not say that they would like to. And again, we're still not worrying about if they enter a lowercase letter or something like that. So now if we run this, it will work just the way it did before. We can just keep typing Y, and I'm just going to keep running. And if we type in N or anything else, it'll stop running. So hopefully you can see how this lets you be much more flexible in cases where you want to kind of have a little bit more control over where you're checking if the loop should keep running or not, right? This if with a break could happen at any point. So for example, if we wanted to do something where we basically kept running until we found something we didn't like, we could do that quite easily. So let's imagine we're giving up on the game idea. Our company has been bought out by Microsoft, and now we're just checking if people would like to switch browsers. So we're going to get in a line of input from the user, and then we're going to say if this line is we'll call this browser, and if the user's browser is equal to Edge, then we'll break, and otherwise we're gonna print out a little message to our user. We're gonna say it looks like you're using, and then we'll print out the browser that they entered. Are you sure you wouldn't rather use Edge? And we'll just add a little line to explain what our program is doing. What browser are you using? And now we have our new Microsoft approved program. This is going to make us the big big bucks, the big browsers. So let's see. We're using Firefox. It looks like you're using Firefox. Are you sure you wouldn't rather use Edge? What browser are you using? We're using Chrome now. We switched. We got tired of Firefox. We want some fancy new tabs or something. You sure you wouldn't rather use Edge? You know what? I think I'm going to use Brave. That's a cool new browser on the block. How about Opera? Nope. All right, Edge then, I guess. And we're done. So you can see this while true combined with the break statement gives us a lot of flexibility to basically keep looping until something happens, at which point we then stop looping. And Obviously, you can write more code after here. You could print a goodbye message, and that would work just the way you would expect. So nothing magic is happening here. It's just we're getting a bit of flexibility using while true with break, because instead of having to check at the beginning of the loop if we want to loop or not, we can basically assume that we're going to loop and then at some point stop. I hope that makes sense, and I hope these examples have helped you kind of see why this can be a very powerful construct. Now, I will say this is also a dangerous construct because this is a while true loop. So if we mess up our code here and it can never get to that break statement, your code will never terminate. So let's imagine that we wanted to let them enter the browser name and it be all lowercase, and we still wanted to know that it was the Edge browser that they were using. So we add a .lowercase call, and that is going to take this input and convert it to lowercase. Now, if we wanted this code to work correctly, we would need to change this to lowercase edge because their input is always going to be lowercase. But let's say we don't catch that and we forget to change this. Now, if a user runs our program, there is no way for them to stop it running. This program will just keep going forever unless you manually kill it, which in our case we can do using the stop button. We can stop it running, but if we don't have a thing on our program that can let us manually stop it, then it will just keep running forever. And so this is a real concern when you're writing code that's going to be deployed onto users' devices, or say something like a server that's grading homework. If you put an infinite loop in there, your code will either stop the device from working, or maybe if it's something like a server, it'll have a built-in thing to stop it after amount of time has elapsed. So this is a very powerful construct. Obviously, do want to be a little careful. Definitely want to make sure that it can get out of this infinite loop, but it's a helpful tool to have in your tool belt for cases just like this, where you want flexibility and to be able to keep doing something an unknown number of times until some sort of condition is finally met. So I hope this is helpful for the homework. As always, if you have more questions, please reach out to me via email and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Have a good weekend.